Germany just beat Ivory Coast 2-1 on a goal in the 94th minute. But forget the score. Let's ask a weirder question. Which team is actually richer? You already think you know the answer. You're probably wrong. Because when we say a national team is worth something, we don't mean trophies, we mean cold, hard market value. Basically, the price tag on every player, all added up. There's a whole industry that tracks that price tag for every player on Earth. Add up a full squad, and you get how much money is literally standing on the pitch. So let's weigh these two teams. First, Germany, 4-time world champions. A talent factory that basically never switches off. Germany's squad is valued at around $950 million. That is almost $1 billion of footballers standing in a single team photo. That sounds enormous, but here's the first twist. It only makes them the 5th most expensive team at this World Cup. France's squad is worth over $1.5 billion. So next to France, even mighty Germany looks a little broke. Keep that in your back pocket. It matters at the end. Now, for the part you think you've already figured out. Ivory Coast, the underdog. The team half the world just Googled to find on a map. So obviously their squad is worth pennies next to Germany, right? A few scrappy players and a tiny fraction of the price? Wrong. Ivory Coast's squad is worth around $520 million. That is not pennies. That is more than $500 million. In fact, that makes Ivory Coast the 11th most valuable squad at the entire tournament, out of 48 teams. They are the most valuable team that isn't from Europe or South America. On pure money, Ivory Coast isn't a minnow, it's a heavyweight. Germany versus Ivory Coast on money isn't 100-1. It's about $950 million to $520, way closer to a fair fight than a blowout. So how does a so-called underdog carry more than $500 million onto the pitch? Here's the secret almost nobody notices. Look at where these Ivorian players actually work. Amad Diallo plays for Manchester United, valued at around $48 million all by himself. Their captain, Franck Kessié, reportedly earns something like £250,000 a week. Others play for Roma, Atalanta, Crystal Palace, top European clubs. Here's the punchline. These players wear the Ivory Coast jersey for a few weeks a year. The rest of the time, they are employed by rich European clubs. So a national team's value doesn't really measure the country at all. It mostly measures the European clubs that own the players. Football money doesn't live in nations. It lives in clubs and leagues. The flag on the shirt is marketing. The wages are coming from somewhere else entirely. Which means the real blowout was never Germany versus Ivory Coast. To actually find it, you have to look in two completely different places. Blowout number 1 is the World Cup itself. France's squad is worth over $1.5 billion. The cheapest squads here are worth a few tens of millions. That's not double. That can be 30, 40, even 50 times the gap. The distance between the top and the bottom of the same tournament dwarfs Germany versus Ivory Coast. And blowout number 2 is the one that actually stings. That Ivory Coast squad is worth more than $500 million. Remember that number. Because back home, Ivory Coast grows almost half of all the cocoa on the planet. The beans behind the chocolate bar in your kitchen drawer. The global chocolate business is worth around $100 billion a year, and the farmers who actually grow those beans often live on about 78 cents a day. So one country sends a squad worth $500 million onto a football pitch, while the people who grow its biggest export survive on pocket change. That is the real blowout. And none of this is the players' fault. They are simply standing exactly where the money decided to pile up, on a pitch in a European league, under the bright lights. That's the lesson hiding inside a football scoreline. Value never really measures a place. It measures whoever owns the asset and signs the checks. So next time you hear that a team, a person, or a whole country is worth some giant number, ask the only question that matters. Worth that to whom, and who actually gets paid? Germany beat Ivory Coast 2-1. But the money game was never close, and it was never really about either of them. Go check who owns the things you cheer for. See you in the next one.